I had exactly $127,000 in my business account the morning I found the camera footage, and by noon that same day, I knew my best friend of 18 years had stolen nearly $500,000 from the nonprofit we'd built together. The timestamp on the security recording showed her in my office at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after I'd been admitted to the hospital for emergency surgery, sitting at my desk with my laptop open and a stack of blank checks in front of her. She wasn't supposed to have access to those checks. She wasn't supposed to be in that building at all. But there she was, signing my name with the same careful precision she'd used to sign my Get Well card. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that the security system we'd installed 6 months earlier had a feature the installer mentioned once and I'd forgotten about until it mattered. Every camera recorded not just video, but metadata. Date, time, device signatures, even the temperature of the room. And every single piece of that data was about to end up in front of a federal prosecutor. Let me take you back to the beginning, because the truth is, I didn't want to believe it. I spent 3 days trying to find another explanation before I accepted what was right in front of me. My name is Lauren Kessler. I'm 42 years old, and until recently, I was the co-founder and executive director of Bridge Forward, a nonprofit in Tucson, Arizona that provides job training and placement services for formerly incarcerated adults. We started the organization in 2014 with $8,000, a rented office above a dental clinic, and a shared belief that people deserved second chances. My co-founder was a woman named Simone Harding. We'd met in grad school at Arizona State, both of us studying social work, both of us idealistic in that particular way that makes you think you can fix systems that have been broken for generations. Simone was brilliant, charismatic, the kind of person who could walk into a room full of skeptical corporate donors and walk out with a $50,000 check and 3 new board members. I was the one who handled operations, budgets, compliance, all the boring infrastructure that keeps a nonprofit from collapsing under its own good intentions. We were a good team, or at least I thought we were. By 2024, Bridge Forward had grown into something neither of us had imagined possible. Annual budget of $1.8 million, staff of 14. Partnerships with 6 major employers across southern Arizona. We'd helped over 600 people find stable employment in the last 3 years alone. The local press loved us. The mayor mentioned us in a speech. We were expanding into a second location in Phoenix. Everything looked perfect from the outside. And maybe that was the problem. I'd stopped looking at the numbers closely because I trusted the person who was supposed to be watching them with me. In July, I started having severe abdominal pain, the kind that makes you double over in the grocery store parking lot and sit there for 20 minutes waiting for it to pass. I ignored it for 2 weeks because we were in the middle of our biggest fundraising push of the year, and I didn't have time to be sick. By the time I finally went to the doctor, I had an ovarian cyst the size of a grapefruit that had ruptured and caused internal bleeding. I went into emergency surgery on July 18th and spent the next week in the hospital, followed by 3 weeks of recovery at home. Simone visited me once, the day after surgery, brought flowers and a card signed by the entire staff and told me not to worry about anything. She said she had everything under control. She said I should focus on healing. I believed her. While I was gone, Simone told the staff I'd asked her to handle all financial approvals temporarily. She said I'd signed documents giving her temporary authority over accounts and contracts while I recovered. This wasn't true, but the staff had no reason to doubt her. Why would they? She was the co-founder. She'd been there from the beginning. She had keys, passwords, access to everything. When I finally returned to the office in late August, everything seemed normal. The bills were paid, payroll had gone through without issues. Our big annual gala was scheduled for September 14th, and Simone had all the logistics handled. She hugged me when I walked in and said she was so relieved I was okay. I hugged her back. I thanked her for keeping everything running. I had no idea what she'd done. The first hint came from our bookkeeper, a quiet woman in her 60s named Rita, who'd been with us for 4 years. Rita handled accounts payable, expense reports, basic reconciliation. She wasn't a CPA, but she knew our systems inside and out. 2 days after I came back, Rita knocked on my office door holding a folder. She looked uncomfortable. She said she had a question about some payments that had been processed while I was out. She showed me 3 checks, all made out to a vendor called Summit Consulting Services. The amounts were $18,500, $22,000, and $31,000. The checks were dated July 25th, August 2nd, and August 9th. All 3 bore my signature. Except I'd been in a hospital bed or drugged on pain medication during all 3 of those dates. I'd never heard of Summit Consulting Services. I'd never signed those checks. I told Rita I needed to see every check that had been issued since July 18th. She brought me the records. There were 11 checks to Summit Consulting Services over a 4-week period, totaling $187,000. Every single one had my signature. Or what looked like my signature. I asked Rita who had authorized these payments. She said Simone had brought the checks to her personally, said they were pre-approved, and asked Rita to process them through the bank. Rita had no reason to question it. Simone was a co-founder. If Simone said the checks were approved, they were approved. I thanked Rita and asked her not to mention this conversation to anyone. Then I closed my office door and started digging. Summit Consulting Services didn't exist. At least not as a registered business in Arizona. I searched the Corporation Commission database, the Secretary of State filings, business license records. Nothing. I called our bank and requested copies of all canceled checks for the last 3 months. They emailed them to me within an hour. I opened each image file and looked at the back of every check. All 11 checks to Summit Consulting had been deposited into an account at a different bank. I couldn't see the account holder's name from the deposit stamp, but I could see the bank name and the branch location. It was in Phoenix, about 2 hours north of our office. I sat there staring at my screen, trying to come up with an innocent explanation. Maybe it was a legitimate vendor and Rita had spelled the name wrong. Maybe the checks were for a new contract I'd forgotten about. Maybe I'd signed them before surgery and the pain medication had wiped my memory. Except none of that made sense. I'm careful about money. I've always been careful. I'd never approved $187,000 to a vendor I'd never heard of. That's when I remembered the security cameras. We'd installed them in June after someone broke into the building next door. 8 cameras covering the office, the hallways, the parking lot. The footage stored on a cloud server for 90 days before it auto-deleted. I logged into the security system and pulled up July 18th, the day of my surgery. I watched Simone arrive at 8:30 a.m., same as always. I watched her leave at 5:45 p.m., normal day. Then I fast-forwarded. At 2:47 a.m. on July 23rd, 5 days after my surgery, Simone's car pulled into the parking lot. I watched her unlock the front door. I watched her walk down the hallway to my office. She was carrying a large tote bag. She was inside my office for 37 minutes. When she left, the tote bag looked fuller. I went back and checked the other dates. August 1st, 2:51 a.m. August 8th, 3:14 a.m. August 15th, 2:38 a.m. Every time a check had been issued, Simone had been in my office in the middle of the night. I couldn't breathe. I sat there watching the footage play and replay, watching my best friend of 18 years move through my office like it belonged to her, and I felt something crack open inside my chest. Not anger, not yet. Just this cold, hollow realization that I'd been wrong about everything. I saved the footage. I downloaded every file. I backed it up to 3 different drives. Then I called a lawyer. His name was Martin Ruiz. He specialized in nonprofit law and had helped us with our 501c3 paperwork years ago. I told him what I'd found. He told me to come to his office immediately and bring everything. I drove to his office in silence. I didn't play music. I didn't cry. I just drove and breathed and tried to understand how this had happened. Martin reviewed everything in less than an hour. The checks, the security footage, the vendor records. Then he asked me 3 questions. Did Simone have signatory authority on the accounts? No, only I did. Did she have access to blank checks? She shouldn't have. They were locked in my desk. Did we have insurance for this kind of thing? Yes. Directors' and officers' liability insurance, required by our major funders. Martin leaned back in his chair and said we needed to do 3 things immediately. First, freeze all accounts and revoke Simone's access to any financial systems. Second, hire a forensic accountant to trace where the money went. Third, file a police report. I asked him if we should talk to Simone first, give her a chance to explain. Martin looked at me like I'd just suggested we invite her to steal more. He said if I confronted her before securing the evidence and the accounts, she'd disappear, destroy records, maybe steal whatever was left. He said this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was embezzlement, and embezzlement is a felony. I called our bank from Martin's office. I told them I needed to place a hold on all accounts pending an internal investigation. They asked if I suspected fraud. I said yes. They froze the accounts within 15 minutes. Then I called our board president, a retired finance executive named Donald Cartwright, who'd been with us since 2016. I told him we had a serious problem and needed an emergency board meeting. He heard something in my voice. He said he'd make calls. We scheduled the meeting for the next morning, 8 a.m., at Martin's office instead of our usual location. I didn't want Simone to know we were meeting. I didn't want her to have any warning. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room with my laptop open, going through 4 years of bank statements. Once I knew what to look for, the pattern was obvious. Small transfers at first, $3,000 here, $5,000 there. Payments to vendors I vaguely recognized but couldn't quite place. Then bigger amounts, $15,000, $28,000. Always just under the threshold that would require board approval. Always to companies with generic names. Summit Consulting, Peak Advisory Group, Meridian Solutions. I searched each one. None of them existed. She'd created fake vendors, fake invoices, fake contracts, and she'd been doing it for at least 2 years. By 3 a.m., I'd documented $470,000 in fraudulent payments. Nearly $500,000 stolen over 24 months, while I sat 10 feet away in my own office, trusting her, believing in her, thinking we were partners. The emergency board meeting started exactly at 8 a.m. 5 board members, Martin, Donald, and me. I presented everything. The checks, the footage, the fake vendors, the timeline. I played 30 seconds of security video showing Simone in my office at 2:47 a.m., sitting at my desk with my checkbook open. The room went completely silent. Not the awkward kind of silence. The kind of silence that happens when everyone realizes they're looking at something that will change everything. Donald asked if I'd contacted Simone. I said no. He said good. Then he asked Martin what our next steps were legally. Martin laid it out. Forensic audit to trace the money. Police report for criminal investigation. Civil lawsuit to recover assets. Potential insurance claim. And immediate termination of Simone's employment and removal from all accounts, systems, and property access. The board voted unanimously to proceed. The entire meeting lasted 22 minutes. Before I continue, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. Thank you so much for your support. We hired a forensic accountant that same day. Her name was Rebecca Chow, recommended by our insurance company, with 15 years of experience tracking financial fraud. She started pulling records immediately. Bank statements, credit card transactions, tax filings, payroll reports. By the end of the week, Rebecca had mapped the entire scheme. Simone had created 9 fake vendor companies. All 9 had bank accounts in Phoenix opened with fake business licenses. The accounts were in the vendor names, but Simone had sole signing authority. She'd deposit our checks into these accounts, wait a few days, then transfer the money to her personal account. From there, it went everywhere. Luxury car lease, mortgage payments on a house in Scottsdale I didn't know she'd bought. Private school tuition for her kids, vacations to Hawaii, Europe, Costa Rica. A boat. She'd bought a boat. Rebecca documented every transaction, every transfer, every dollar. The total amount stolen was $473,000. While Rebecca built the financial case, I had to deal with the reality that we had a staff of 14 people who were about to find out their co-founder was a criminal. And we had our annual fundraising gala in 8 days, an event that typically brought in $200,000 with 300 guests confirmed, including every major donor, every board member, the mayor, and half the local media. Canceling wasn't an option. We needed that money to survive what was coming. So I made a decision. We'd proceed with the gala as planned. We wouldn't announce anything publicly until after the event. And Simone would be there, smiling and shaking hands and giving her speech, with no idea that in 48 hours she'd be arrested. I know how that sounds. Cold, calculating, maybe even cruel. But here's the thing. Simone had spent 2 years stealing from an organization that existed to help people who'd made mistakes and were trying to rebuild their lives. She'd stolen from formerly incarcerated adults trying to feed their families. She'd stolen from donors who believed their money was changing lives. And she'd done it while I was in a hospital bed, recovering from surgery, trusting her to take care of everything. So yes, I let her stand on that stage. I let her bask in the applause. Because I wanted her to understand later what she'd thrown away. This isn't revenge. This is justice. The gala was held at the Tucson Museum of Art on September 14th. The venue was beautiful. String lights, desert landscaping, a courtyard under the stars. Simone wore a navy dress and heels. She worked the room like a politician, hugging donors, laughing at jokes, thanking everyone for their support. She gave a speech about resilience and second chances. She talked about how proud she was of what we'd built together. She used the word we 14 times. I counted. I stood at the back of the room and watched her perform, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. After her speech, our board president Donald took the microphone. He thanked Simone for her years of service. Then he said he had an announcement. He said that effective immediately, Bridge Forward would be undergoing a leadership transition. He said I would be assuming sole executive director responsibilities, and that Simone would be stepping down to pursue other opportunities. He said it with such calm authority that most people in the room probably thought it was planned. Simone's face went pale. She looked at me across the room. I didn't look away. Donald continued. He said the organization was entering an exciting new chapter. He thanked everyone for their continued support. Then he invited everyone to enjoy the rest of the evening. The whole thing took 90 seconds. Simone found me in the lobby 20 minutes later. She was shaking. She said, "What the hell was that?" I said it was the truth. She said we needed to talk privately. I said we'd talk tomorrow with lawyers present. She grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight enough to hurt. She said I was making a huge mistake. She said she'd built this organization as much as I had. She said I couldn't just erase her. I pulled my arm away gently. I said the security cameras showed her in my office at 2:47 a.m., signing checks to fake vendors. I said I had the bank records. I said I had everything. Her face changed. The color drained completely. She opened her mouth. Then she closed it. Then she turned and walked out of the museum without saying another word. That was the last time I saw her in person. The next morning, I filed a police report with the Tucson Police Department. Detective Maria Sandoval took my statement. I brought printed copies of everything: the bank records, the security footage on a USB drive, Rebecca's forensic audit, the fake vendor registrations. Maria reviewed it all without speaking. Then she said this was one of the cleanest embezzlement cases she'd seen. She said most people don't keep records this organized. She said most victims don't have video evidence. She said we'd done everything right. She filed the report. She said a detective from the Financial Crimes Unit would contact me within 48 hours. 3 days later, Simone was arrested at her house in Scottsdale. She was charged with 11 counts of felony theft, 9 counts of fraud, and 6 counts of forgery. Bail was set at $50,000. She posted it the same day. Her lawyer reached out to Martin 2 weeks later. He wanted to negotiate. He said Simone was willing to repay the money if we dropped the criminal charges. Martin's response was 3 sentences long. The criminal charges are not ours to drop. That's up to the prosecutor. Your client should have thought about consequences before she committed 26 felonies. The trial was set for March. Simone pleaded not guilty. Her defense strategy, based on pre-trial motions, seemed to be that she'd had implied authority to make financial decisions, and that the payments were legitimate consulting fees she'd simply failed to document properly. It was absurd, but it was her only option. In January, something unexpected happened. One of our board members, a woman named Patricia Lim, who ran a small accounting firm, came to me with information. Patricia said she'd done some digging after the arrest became public. She'd contacted 5 other nonprofits in Arizona where Simone had previously worked or served on boards. 3 of them reported financial irregularities during the time Simone was involved. One had quietly settled a dispute over missing funds. Another had dissolved entirely after their accounts were drained. None of them had pressed charges. They'd just let her leave. Patricia had documentation, emails, settlement agreements, board meeting minutes. She'd compiled everything into a single file. She gave it to me and said she thought the prosecutor should see it. I forwarded everything to Detective Sandoval. 2 days later, Simone was charged with an additional 18 counts related to fraud at 2 other organizations. The bail was revoked. She was arrested again. This time, she didn't post bail. She stayed in jail for 3 weeks before her family scraped together enough for a bond. By then, her lawyer had changed tactics. He reached out to the prosecutor about a plea deal. In February, Simone pleaded guilty to 15 counts of felony theft and fraud. In exchange, the other charges were dropped. She was sentenced to 7 years in prison and ordered to pay $473,000 in restitution. The judge, a woman in her 50s who'd spent 20 years on the bench, said she'd rarely seen such calculated betrayal. She said Simone had stolen not just money, but trust from an organization dedicated to helping people rebuild their lives after mistakes. She said the sentence reflected the severity of that betrayal. 1 year later, Bridge Forward is still operating. We survived. Barely, but we survived. Our insurance covered $200,000 of the stolen funds. We launched an emergency fundraising campaign and raised another $150,000. We tightened our controls, hired a part-time CFO, implemented new oversight systems. We're smaller now. Staff of 9 instead of 14. Budget of $1.2 million instead of $1.8 million. But we're still here. We're still helping people. Last month, we placed our 700th client in stable employment. I'm still the executive director. I work longer hours than I should. I still don't delegate financial oversight to anyone. I probably never will. That's the thing about betrayal. It changes you. Not always in ways you'd choose, but in ways you need. Simone is serving her sentence at the Arizona State Prison Complex in Perryville. She'll be eligible for parole in 2029. I don't think about her often. When I do, I don't feel angry anymore. I just feel sad. Sad that she thought stealing was easier than asking for help. Sad that she destroyed 18 years of friendship for a boat and a house and vacations she couldn't afford. Sad that she'll never understand the people she hurt most weren't me or the board or the donors. They were the clients, the people who came to us looking for second chances while she was stealing their futures. I learned something through this. I learned that trust is essential, but verification is mandatory. I learned that Shan-Yi doesn't protect you from harm. I learned that the people closest to you can hurt you worst because they know exactly where to aim. But I also learned that you can survive betrayal. You can build something good from wreckage. You can look at devastating evidence and still choose to keep going. Not because you're strong, because you're stubborn, because giving up would mean she won. And I wasn't about to let that happen. If you're watching this and nodding, if you've ever trusted someone who broke that trust, I want you to know something. It wasn't your fault. You're not naive for believing in people. You're not stupid for not seeing it coming. Betrayal works because good people assume other people are good too. That's not a weakness. That's called being human. What matters is what you do after. Do you let it break you, or do you let it teach you? Do you stop trusting everyone, or do you learn to trust more carefully? There's no right answer. There's only your answer. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to choose between confronting someone you loved and protecting something bigger than both of you? What did you choose? Tell me in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, if it helped you feel less alone, subscribe. There are more stories to tell. Take care of yourself, really. I mean it.